Alright. If I could push the right buttons over here, that would be great. What is going on, everybody? So, I'm having 2 streams today. One of them, I want to give my video editor something to work with for editing Magic the Gathering content and streams for the, or not streams, for the, God, words are hard. I need footage for the YouTube channel. Like, I can't do shit if I don't give my editor nothing to work with. So that's what we're doing here. So how this stream is going to go, okay? I will talk to some of you guys in the comment section in between explaining decks, if that makes any sense to you. That way, we could kind of have a chill, fucking vibed out stream here, right? And then afterwards, you know, we could still banter and talk back and forth, right? But then I could still get the footage I need. So we're going to be doing that. And after this stream, I'm probably going to chill out for like a half hour or so. And then I'll stream Starfield. How's that sound? It's fucking double shot Sunday. So, with that being said, let's get this business started. So the first deck I'm going to be explaining is going to be Flickertron. So the most important part of any given deck is the mana base. So we're going to talk about that first. So in this particular deck, we have 4 islands and 1 plains for our basic lands. We have a copy of Bojuka Bog. Comes into play tapped. You can tap it as black. Beyond that, when it enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard. We're going to set that to the side for now, because we will end up revisiting it a little bit later. So, now that we are, you know, getting into that, let's talk about filtering, okay? This is, in a roundabout way, this is a 5-color deck. I only have like 3 colors of mana on the table here. So, and this isn't even... So, we have to get the mana that we need, right? We got to get the colors that we need. So, we have Unknown Shores. It will tap to add 1 generic, or you can filter 1 generic into 1 mana of any color. Energy Refractor is kind of the same thing, but instead of 1 mana, it's 2. So you filter 2 for 1. But when it enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card. We will set those guys over there and revisit them again a little bit later. So this particular deck requires a lot of mana in order to get our payoff. So how are we going to get all of that mana? Well, we have Urza's Tower, Urza's Mine, and Urza's Power Plant. Individually, they tap as 1 colorless, but when you combine all 3 of them together, they tap as 7. 2 plus 2 plus 3 is 7. So, we would use these with Energy Refractor or Unknown Shores to convert to whatever color of mana we want, right? That being said, we went through our lands. We want to make sure that we get the power plant and the tower and all that stuff. And without assistance, that becomes a little bit difficult. So we have expeditionary map. You can pay 2 colorless and tap it to sack to search your library for any land. When I say any land, I mean you could grab this Urza's power plant, you could grab Bajuka Bog, you could grab Unknown Shores if you want. Like, it doesn't care what type of land you're getting a land. So, in a nutshell, that is how your basic Tron deck works, right? So how does this specific Tron deck work? Well, it all revolves around 2 different cards. Ghostly Flicker and Ephemerate. So Ephemerate is nice because it only costs 1 mana. Exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. And it has Rebound. So on your next turn, during your upkeep, you get to play it again without its casting cost. Ghostly Flicker lets you exile 2 artifacts, creatures, or lands, and then return them back to the battlefield under your control. So, you could use that to say, exile your creature and your Urza's Tower to untap your Urza's Tower, because it comes back into play untapped. You could flicker Bajuka Bog to exile the opponent's graveyard. You can do that multiple times. That way they can never have any good stuff in their graveyard to reanimate back out of it. And we only run 1 Bajuka Bog because if we really need it, we can find it with our expedition maps. See how that works? Life's great. So, these guys are the core of everything in this deck. And as we get further into it, you'll see even more all the crazy interactions that those have with this deck. So, one of the cards that we will win the game with, or it will help us just get stuff, Muldrifter. We're running 4 copies of Muldrifter. So it's a 2/2 flyer. It costs 1 blue and 4. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards. Now, the caveat to this, or the cool thing about this, is it's got an evoke cost, which means that you can cast it for less. And then you would sacrifice it. However, you can use Ghostly Flicker or Ephemerate to avoid having to sacrifice it. And then on top of that, it would flicker again and you get to draw an additional 2 cards. So if I say played Muldrifter, right? Muldrifter resolves, hits the battlefield. Then I play Ephemerate targeting Muldrifter. Rather than paying 5, I paid 4 and I got to draw twice as many cards. Absolutely nasty. On top of that, it's a 2/2 flyer. I can use it to chump the opponent down. It's great. So, in the name of that, we got, the whole thing is we're trying to get our combo pieces together, right? So drawing cards is great. We also have Seagate Oracle. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the other on the bottom of the library. So I can be like, okay, this is cool. I'll keep this. That's garbage. I'll put that on the bottom. Whatever. I don't need that, And because it as well has an enters the battlefield ability, I can do that ability over and over again with the help of Ghostly Flicker or Ephemerate. Now here's where stuff really starts to get a little bit crazy. So we have 3 copies of Mnemonic Wall. It is a 0/4 wall. It's got Defender. When it enters the battlefield, you may return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. That doesn't sound all that crazy, but if I've got Ghostly Flicker, right, and I want to say Flicker Seagate Oracle and Mnemonic Wall, I can this Ghostly Flicker goes to the graveyard. When Mnemonic Wall comes back, I can target Ghostly Flicker with it and bring it back to my hand and do that over and over and over and over again. Absolutely awesome. You can do, I don't know, a slightly slower version of that with Ephemerate. So we have 4 copies of Seagate Oracle, which is absolutely awesome. 3 copies of, well, actually, no, we got 4 copies. 3 copies of Mnemonic Wall, however you say it. Now, my favorite creature in this deck, my favorite creature in this deck is Stonehorn Dignitary. Stonehorn Dignitary is the patron saint of fuck around and find out. This card will completely make you hate life if somebody is abusing it in the way that this deck does. So, when it enters the battlefield, fuck. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent skips his or her next combat phase. That means they don't get to attack. The majority of decks in this game want to win by turning cards sideways and attacking you, and Stonehorn Dignitary dictates that you don't get to do that. And then when you use Ghostly Flicker or Ephemerate a few times, you know, all of those additional combat steps stack up on top of each other. You could keep your opponent from attacking for several turns. So if you like Ghostly Flicker on Stonehorn Dignitary and Mnemonic Wall, you get your Ghostly Flicker back and you get to just do it again and again and again. Your opponent never gets to attack. And we don't really like taking combat damage because that makes us lose the game. So we also have Moment's Peace. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn, and it has flashback, and I could also, if I really felt like it, bring it back from the grave with Mnemonic Wall. We have Mystical Teachings. Mystical Teachings lets you search your library for an instant or a card with flash, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle the library. And it has flashback so you can, you know, play it again. And because this works at instant speed, it's basically an extra copy of every instant in my deck. It's an extra Pulse of Murissa. Return a creature or land card from a graveyard to its owner's hand and gain 6 life. Really good against burn. We got Compulsive Research. Target player draws 3 cards and that player discards 2 unless they discard a land card. I've come to really like this card on Arena, which is why I'm running 1 single copy in here. We have Prohibit. Counter target spell if its converted mana cost is 2 or less. If it was kicked, counter that spell if it's 4 or less instead. We got Dispel to counter instances or sorceries. Actually, wait, no, it's just instances. Counter target instant spell. Fucking learn to read, Sov. Anyways, this is really good for control matchups. Somebody goes to counter what I'm doing, and I counter their counter. And the reason I'm running Prohibit instead of Counterspell is because I might not always have 2 blue to do stuff with. I have Condescend. Counter target spell unless its controller pays X. It costs 1 blue and X. With the amount of mana this deck generates, I can make that X go pretty fucking high. Now, we're not just closing the game by chumping somebody off with flying Mole Drifters, right? We also have other things that we need to do. We need a real closer in this deck. Crazy thing is, I've actually got one. So, the final two cards that I'm going to showcase from this deck, before we get into the tokens and sideboard, 2 copies of Demarova Horror. When it enters the battlefield, return target permanent to its owner's hand, then that player discards a card. Now, when that happens like once, it doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal. However, if I have Ghostly Flicker and Mnemonic Wall out and I can just do that over and over and over again, then you start to really run into some issues where you're not having lands and not being able to, you know, play Magic. And I've got a 4/4 out along with everything else that I've got out, and I could just beat face. Assuming that my opponent didn't scoop after they saw this tomfuckery. So, sideboard and tokens. Well, this deck doesn't really require any tokens, but we do have a sideboard for it. Red is a pretty bad matchup against it. It's not overly fond of things that are going faster than it. Not overly fond of burn. So we have a lot of hate for that. We have 2 copies of Blue Elemental Blast. And we have 4 copies of Hydroblast. They both do the same thing. Counter target red spell. Destroy target red permanent. So, yeah, we have plenty of red hate. And since I continue to dislike red, we also have a single copy of Lone Missionary. When it enters the battlefield, gain 4 life. And I'll just flicker that over and over again. Like, whatever. Now I just gained a bunch of life. Now our next thing that we tend to not really like playing against very much with this deck would be blue. So we have 4 copies of Pyroblast in the sideboard. Counter target spell if it's blue, or destroy target permanent if it's blue. It's basically the red version of the Hydroblast or the Blue Elemental Blast. We've got ephemeral shards. Can get target creature indestructible till end of turn. I will typically use that to, you know, protect my Stonehorn dignitaries or anything else I don't want my opponent to get rid of. Affinity, no. As you'll see later on in this, the struggle with affinity is very real. So, we have 1 card for that. Shattering Pulse. Why do we only have 1? Because we can fetch it with Mystical Teachings. Destroy target artifact. It has buyback, so I can just keep using it. And then we have 2 copies of Dispel, just in case we're up against blue. Yeah, I will, you know, dispel your counter. So, that is Flickertron. It is legitimately a deck that will make your opponent feel like bouncing you on and off the table. Ooh, that burnt. Oh. What's going on, Jamie? How you doing, bud? Just sitting here explaining some Magic the Gathering decks. Maybe somebody who doesn't know how to play Magic or doesn't know, or maybe somebody who doesn't play Pauper would see the like kind of power levels that Pauper has. We're just explaining our Pauper decks. Magic the Gathering, man, you're going to see more content coming out about this pretty soon. So I'm explaining decks that I've built. I'm going to make some videos about it. So, well, happy Turkey Day. So yeah, I'll chill out with you guys for a couple of minutes. And then after that, I'm going to move on to the next deck, which is going to be another Tron deck. I don't know. People who haven't played Magic before could learn something from this. People who've played Magic but haven't played Pauper can learn something from this. And I'll have footage to use on future videos, which will be swell. Happy fucking Turkey Day, guy. I didn't know Canada had a Turkey Day. Y'all ready for the next deck? I am. Let's do this shit. So, the next deck we're going to be talking about is Altertron. It is a combo deck that revolves around using a card called Ashnod's Altar combined with Retriever to enable Golem Foundry to basically go infinite. I know that sounded confusing as fuck, but bear with me here and you'll see what I'm on about, okay? So we're going to go into our mana base first because your mana is the most important part of any deck. So, we got one forest. We have a single copy of Polluted Mire. Enters the battlefield tapped. Can tap it to add black. It's got cycling, so I can discard it and draw a card if I decide I don't really want the damn thing. We have Haunted Fingraph. Taps to add a colorless. Sacrifice it, return a creature card at random from your graveyard to your hand. I will use that to get back stuff I don't want dead. It's really that simple. This is a combo deck, so you want a little bit of card filtering. So we have 2 copies of Crystal Grotto. When it enters the battlefield, scry 1. Look at the top card of your library. You may put that card on the bottom of your library. Tap it to add colorless, or, and here's where it gets really awesome, okay? You can also use it to filter your mana to get whatever color you want. I love it. It's great. Now the absolute core of our mana base is Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Tower. And this is pretty much how any Tron deck works. Each of these individually taps as 1 mana, as 1 colorless mana. However, this taps as 2, this taps as 2, and this taps as 3 if all 3 of them are on the field. So 2 plus 2 plus 3 is 7. You got 7 mana right there if you got all 3 of them. And it really enables you to do some absolutely crazy things in this game. Just having that much mana early on, it's great. But to make sure that we get all of those pieces that we need, we have 4 copies of Expedition Map. 2 colorless and tap to sacrifice it to search your library for a land. Any land. And then put it in your hand. So, every Tron deck needs that. And I have a lot of Tron decks. I really like Tron. So, the meat and potatoes here. Like I explained it a little bit earlier, now I'm going to show you, okay? We got 4 copies of Golem Foundry. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may put a charge counter on Golem Foundry. Remove 3 charge counters from Golem Foundry. Put a 3/3 Golem artifact token onto the battlefield. Now that, in and of itself, doesn't sound bad. However, we're able to go infinite with this. There's this wonderful little card here called Ashnod's Altar. Sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless to your mana pool. And then we got Mirror Retriever. When it dies, return another target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, here is where the combo goes infinite, right? I would have... Well, let me get a bunch of these out of the way just so you can see what the board might look like in this situation. So, we've got 1 Golem Foundry, right? 1 Ashnod's Altar. So what's going to happen is we're going to sack... see, this Mirror Retriever's in the graveyard, right? We're going to sacrifice this Mirror Retriever to bring this Mirror Retriever out of the graveyard and get 2 colorless mana, right? And this costs 2 colorless mana. So we can play it, sacrifice it for another 2 colorless mana, bring the other one back, play it again. Meanwhile, this guy is sitting over here just racking up counters. Every time we play that card, we put a counter on this. Once we get to 3 counters, we get a 3/3 Golem. So by doing that, we get infinite 3/3 Golems. We can go all fucking day making them. I mean, we have to wait till the next turn to attack with them, but we have a crap load of golems, and we can continue making even more. So, what do we have that helps us enable this combo and stay alive? Because that's the important part. You want to enable your combo, and you want to stay alive. Not dying is great in this game. So, we need to get our cards. We need to get our pieces. And then once we get our pieces, we need to, support that combo. So, let's talk about how we're going to get our pieces. We're going to get our pieces through ridiculous amounts of card draw. So, we got 3 copies of Ichor Wellspring. When it's put into the battlefield... or put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So you can potentially draw 2 cards from that. So you'd use a card like, say, you play this guy, draw a card, use Deadly Dispute, sacrifice it, draw a card from its trigger, and then once Deadly Dispute resolves, draw 2 cards from Deadly Dispute's trigger and get a treasure token. I just drew 4 cards off the top of my deck right there, which is great. So we have 4 copies of Deadly Dispute. Chromatic Sphere. It has an ability that lets you sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool and draw a card. Pretty good card. Not as good as Chromatic Star in this deck. Chromatic Star is quite similar. It does almost the exact same thing. You can tap 1, tap it, sack, add 1 mana of any color. And then when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. If I don't care about getting the mana of any color, I can just sack this with Deadly Dispute, right? And get a treasure token. And depending on the timing of that, that's, potentially free. So you can generate so much value for yourself just with that. And that really helps get the combo pieces, so that you can win the game. Because at the end of the day, you want to win the game. So you got Kinsmith. When it enters the battlefield, search for a Mer card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle. You can have Mer Kinsmith pull another Mer Kinsmith to thin out your deck a little bit. Or you could just, go for the gusto and get Mer Retriever, which is, you need 2 of those for your combo. Energy Refractor, you'll all have seen that card. It helps us filter mana to any color we want. Mostly either just green or black. And then we have the last cards we have to show you before we get to the sideboard and tokens. We've got Ancient Stirrings. Oh, fuck. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a colorless card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So we would use that for fishing for our combo pieces. Although we could, most everything in this deck is, colorless, so we could just about get whatever we want. And then we got Weather the Storm. Weather the Storm is really crazy in this deck. So once I have infinite casts with my combo, I could use Weather the Storm to get infinite life. Now that doesn't happen very often, but what does happen is I cast a bunch of these low-cost spells. And I get a crap load of life. So that the Oracle text on this card reads, you gain 3 life, Storm. So what Storm means is when I cast this, I can copy it for each spell that was cast before it this turn. That counts my spells. That counts my opponent's spells. It counts a lot of stuff. That Storm counter can get really crazy really fast. I mean, I have had games where I have gained like 40 life with that card. Considering you start out with 20. Now, we're on to tokens and sideboard. So what tokens are you going to want for this deck? You're going to want blood tokens. You're going to want golems. Boom. That's all you need. Easy day. If you're feeling particularly enterprising, you can do what I did, right? You can get the golem token that you can flip over to turn into a blood token. And then you always have the tokens that you need. They're probably like 10 cents. Just have your tokens, Broheim. Now, we'll get into the sideboard. We have one more copy of Weather the Storm in the sideboard because it is that good of a card. I love that card, dude. Let's see. We have Masked Vandal. It's a 1/3 changeling. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature from your graveyard. If you do, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So, yeah, you basically use that for artifact or enchantment removal. And it was just, I don't know, something I was playing around with. See, we got Fangren Marauder. This card gets kind of crazy in this deck, too. Whenever, it's a 5/5 for 6, but whenever an artifact is put into the graveyard, you may gain 5 life. So, when I have my Ashnod's Altar Mer Retriever combo going off, I could essentially gain infinite life. So, and having infinite life is not going to make me unkillable, but you're going to have to find another way to do it than, turning creatures sideways. So, that's great. Completely pisses off burn players. I love it. From there, we've got, when we're playing against, like, mono blue or any kind of control stuff, we like having these duresses. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land from it. The player discards that card. So what we use this for in this particular context is protecting our combo, right? by making sure that we can, get that counter spell out of their hand. Or if they reveal their hand and we find out they have multiple counter spells, then we will play a little bit differently to try to bait out the counter spells. Because it's all about trying to get our combo to resolve. We have makeshift munitions. I mostly have that for fairies. Or like anybody that wants to like try to cheat you with 1/1s. You can sacrifice an artifact or creature to deal 1 damage to any target. I mean, I guess you could burn out your opponent with it, but I seldom find myself doing that. Ancient Grudge. Destroy target artifact, flash it back for 1 green. That's great in this deck considering we're running a lot of green. And then we got Smash to Dust ×2. Choose 1, destroy target artifact, destroy target creature with defender, deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control. So this is a huge middle finger to anybody running a fairy deck or walls combo or blowing up more artifacts. This card is hate for some of the craziest shit in Pauper. The final card we have for our sideboard is Nile Spellbomb. Artifact hate's never a bad thing to have. I mean, not artifact hate. Graveyard hate's never a bad thing to have. I always try to have some, at a minimum, in the sideboard of every deck I make. But it exiles all cards from target player's graveyard. And if you pay black after it's put into the graveyard, you can draw a card. So, yeah, that's Altertron. So the first Tron deck that I've shown was like a control deck. That particular Tron that I just showed now is a combo deck. Man, y'all thought I was done showing you Tron decks. No, sir. No, sir. Abso-fucking-lutely not. Now, let's move on with something a little bit less elegant and a little more, I don't know, blunt force trauma. We'll move on to mono green Tron. So we got, for, as everybody knows, the mana base is the most important part of any Magic the Gathering deck, right? So we got 5 forests. This deck is leaning pretty heavily into green, but green's not necessarily the only thing it wants to do. So we have Crystal Grottos to, let us scry and filter our cards, and to also let us filter our mana. Because you can turn 1 colorless into 1 of any color. Now, the fundamental part of any Tron deck. Urza's Tower, 4 copies. Urza's Power Plant, 4 copies. Urza's Mine, 4 copies. Now, for those of you who don't know how Tron works, is you have all of these dudes that tap as 1. However, if you have all 3 of them, the Mine taps as 2, Power Plant taps as 2, Tower taps as 3. So 2 plus 2 plus 3 is 7. If you have all 3 of those out on your 3rd turn, oof, man, you are so far ahead of your opponent. So, in order to ensure that we find those, as you'll see with literally any other Tron deck on the face of the planet, we're running 4 copies of Expedition Map. Tap it, and 2 to sacrifice it. Search your library for a land card. Any land card. Could be a forest, could be a Tron piece, could be a Crystal Grotto, could be whatever. Put it in your hand. So, y'all have seen Control, and y'all have seen Combo. But, let's look at Stompy. Fangren Marauder. Whenever an artifact is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may gain 5 life. Don't kill my shit, or I will gain life. Simple as that. Boulder Breach Golem. It can be a 3/3 or a 6/5, depending on how much mana you want to spend on it. Costs 7 colorless. We may as well just spend that, because, you know, we're playing Tron. When it enters the battlefield, it gains life, or you gain life equal to its power. You know, 6 life right there. That's pretty awesome. So far, all of this just looks like a huge middle finger to red, right? And we got Wretched Griff. Whenever you cast Wretched Griff, draw a card. And it also has flying. It's a 3/4 with flying. For Pauper, that's pretty fat. But we got to get to the real meat and potatoes of the deck. We got to get to the cards that made me make this deck, right? Like, fucking, what is all this other shit? Well, we have 4 copies of Ulamog's Crusher. It is an 8/8 with Annihilator 2. That means when I attack you, you have to sacrifice 2 of your things. It also attacks every turn if able. That can be good or bad, depending on if the opponent has death touch creatures or not. We have Maelstrom Colossus. It's got Cascade. It's a 7/7 with Cascade. Cascade means whenever you cast this card, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less than you know, Maelstrom Colossus in this case. And then you get to play it. You can cast it. Now, one thing to note, okay? You cascade whether Maelstrom Colossus resolves or not. So, if you counter my Maelstrom Colossus, but I still cascaded into that Wretched Griff, I still get that Wretched Griff. Countering it does not prevent it from doing that trigger, because that trigger happens on cast. However, if you're patient and you let me cascade, you get to decide which one you counter if you're going to counter something. So if I cascade into, say, like this expedition map here, well, you probably don't care if I search for lands, because if I'm playing Maelstrom Colossus, I already have all the fucking mana in the world. So you counter Maelstrom Colossus and I'm stuck with an expedition map, and it's like, ugh, that feels bad. All right. 4 copies of Chromatic Sphere. Can use it to filter mana, and, you know, when it dies or whatever, like, draw a card. Chromatic Star is basically the same thing, but better. So, in our main board, we have a single copy of Relic of Progenitus. I wasn't really sure what else to put in its place. And it's a card that I put in most of my sideboards. So, figured I'd mainboard one just in case I need it. Basically, you tap it to remove a card from target player removes a card from his or target player removes a card in his or her graveyard from the game. But you can also tap it to remove it from the game, and remove all graveyards from the game and draw a card. We have 4 copies of Ancient Stirrings. Ancient Stirrings is going to let us look at the top 5 cards of our library and reveal a colorless card from among them and put it into our hand. Most of the cards in this deck are colorless, so you're pretty much guaranteed to get something. And then last but most definitely not least, 4 copies of Abundant Harvest. Abundant Harvest, you choose a land or non-land, reveal cards from your library until you reveal a card of the chosen type. Put that card into your hand and the rest at your bottom of your library in any order. So if you're fishing for Tron pieces, or you're fishing for something else, that's great to have. Now let's get into the sideboard. Sideboard time. What could I possibly need in this sideboard? Let's see. Well, we got 2 more copies of Relica Progenitus because fuck it, why not? Let's see. Fiery Cannonade times 3. It deals 2 damage to each non-pirate creature. It's basically a board wipe. We got 4 copies of Degolmer. Choose target artifact or enchantment. Its owner shuffles it into his or her library. Now, the reason why I picked this particular card over straight up, I'm gonna fucking massacre you like the last card is because, or like the last deck, is because when I was building this deck, I had just lost to Boggles like a week ago. And if you, like, they have Rancor, and if you destroy Rancor, it shuffles back into the fucking deck. It's like, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. If you destroy Rancor, it goes back to the opponent's hand, right? So, rather than going back into the hand, we'll just put it back into the deck, so you at least don't have it for now. Pulse of Murissa. Return target creature or land card from a graveyard to its owner's hand. You gain 6 life. Fuck you, burn. That's why that card is there. It's also why Weather the Storm is there. You gain 3 life. It's got Storm. I think I explained what Storm is, but every time you cast a spell, or every time anybody casts a spell, you know, the amount of spells that were cast that turn, you get to copy your Storm card that many times. It's absolutely madness sometimes. There's quite a few cards that were banned just because they have Storm. Ow! Fuck, my lighting's all fucked up. Alright, on to the next. So now we're gonna, you know, we'd mentioned Bogles earlier. Now we're gonna actually talk about Bogles. Forest, our mana base. Most fundamental part of any deck. So with that in mind, we're not running Tron, so you're going to see a lot more colored mana here. We have 11 forests. We have 4 copies of plains. 3 copies of Ash Barrens. And I like Ash Barrens because it has basic land cycling. You can discard it, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. Basically, the reason why you would want to use that is to make sure you get the land that you want. So, let's talk about what this entire deck is based around now. We got the mana base out of the way. So, Slippery Bogle, 1/1, hexproof. That's it. Nothing else remarkable about it. Doesn't sound like that great of a card, does it? Hexproof makes it so that your opponent cannot target it with spells or abilities. It's basically protected from being killed by removal, which is great. Glade Cover Scout is basically another copy of Slippery Bogle. It's the exact same thing. Costs 1 mana, 1/1, hexproof. Sohana Ledgewalker. This one's kind of interesting. So, it cannot be blocked except by creatures with flying. It itself, however, does not have flying. So, it cannot be blocked by creatures with reach. I know, that's confusing as shit. It also cannot be the target of spells or abilities the opponent controls. So it's basically a bigger Bogle. Now, what is the point of this? Okay, we got these small, tiny little bastards with hexproof that the opponent can't touch, but they can still block them, and they're fucking small. Fuck should we care about any of that? Well, here's where it gets fun, right? First, I'm going to show you my favorite card in the deck. Like, you gotta, basically, these creatures, you're chalking them up with enchantments and making them just fucking huge. And then after that you attack. So let's talk about my favorite card, my favorite enchantment in this deck. And that, my friend, is Armadillo Cloak. Enchanted creature gets 2/2 and has trample. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage, you gain that much life. Now, a lot of people confuse that for lifelink. It's not. It's different. It's different in that this affects the controller. So, I can put this on your creature as my opponent. Put this on my opponent's creature. Whenever they deal damage, whether it's to me or whether it's to one of my creatures, whenever they deal damage, I gain that much life. So I can use that to lock one of my opponent's creatures down to prevent them from killing me with it. Or I can, kind of go a little bit nuts and put it on my stuff. Now, one thing that is of note, okay, if you put this on your opponent's creature, it will not save you from lethal damage. And the reason for that is because this ability goes on the stack. So before anything on the stack resolves when it comes to your damage, because damage is not on the stack. So your opponent swings at you for lethal, you take your damage, you go to 0, and then you die as a state-based action before Armadillo Cloak can save you. As long as they're not hitting you for lethal, however, you're good to go. So just, I don't know, bear that in mind if you're copying this deck or if you're playing against somebody else who's got this deck and they try to argue over you with it or whatever. Now, we have 3 enchantments in this deck that are just going to make the Bogles ridiculously big, ridiculously fast. Enchantment number 1. We have 4 copies of All That Glitters. It was downshifted to Pauper with the recent... It was downshifted to Common with the recent Commander Masters release, which made it Pauper legal. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. There's actually another deck that this brought into the fucking fold, but we'll get into that some other time. But yeah, it counts for artifacts and enchantments, and we control a lot of enchantments, so that +1/+1 gets pretty big pretty fast. We also have Ethereal Armor, which is kind of like that, but cheaper. Ethereal Armor costs enchanted creature gets 1/1 for each enchantment you control and has first strike. First strike makes your Bogle really hard to deal with, especially when it gets big. Ancestral Mask. This is where it really pops off. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each other enchantment on the battlefield. On the battlefield. So it counts your opponent's enchantments too. So that is that's the meat and potatoes. We have some other enchantments too that we're gonna get into though. Rancor. This is actually another one of my favorite cards in this deck. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0 and has trample. When Rancor is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Rancor to its owner's hand. Now, I had to explain this to somebody at a competitive event. But one thing to be aware of with Rancor is if somebody counters it, it never made it to the battlefield because it never resolved. So if somebody counters it, it's dead. And if somebody exiles it, it's gone. Beyond that, yeah, the Bogle it's on dies, they get the Rancor back. Pretty rude. So we have Spirit Link. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage, you gain that much life. So I can do the same kind of fuckery that I can do with my opponent's deck, where it's kind of making it where if their creature deals damage, because I'm the controller of the enchantment, I gain that much life. Or I could just make it to where I gain life. Now, I got Lifelink. If you want to double dip, and this is kind of crazy, but if you want to double dip, you can put Spirit Link and Lifelink on the same creature, and you can double the amount of life you would gain. Because the triggers are working separately. And also, fucking Spirit Link is not Lifelink. It's not giving the creature Lifelink. They're two very similar but different abilities. Cartouche of Solidarity. Enchant creature you control. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white soldier token with vigilance. Enchanted creature gets 1/1 and has first strike. I just have that in there to be something else to give something first strike. I don't really care about the token. But yeah, we have a lot of enchantments in the name of making our stuff bigger, with things that make things bigger for every enchantment you control. So we got 4 copies of Abundant Growth. It pretty much lets you filter your mana. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Not particularly remarkable, but it is another enchantment that goes towards the number of enchantments I control. However, Utopia Sprawl. And this card was reprinted in Wilds of Eldraine. So the Wilds of Eldraine version of it's like 70 cents. This used to be a $5 card. When Utopia Sprawl comes into play, choose a color. Whenever Enchanted Forest is tapped for mana, its controller can add 1 mana of the chosen color to his or her mana pool. So what makes Utopia Sprawl better than Abundant Growth is with Utopia Sprawl, you're getting 2 mana. What's not to like? Now, last but certainly not least when it comes to this specific deck, gonna be Mana Tithe. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. People who are running white aren't typically countering stuff. People who are playing against white don't typically expect to have their stuff countered. I have 1 copy of this card and only 1 copy of this card in this deck just to fuck with people. I will counter your thing. because you don't expect it. And then after that, you'll be playing the whole game, waiting for me to drop a mana tithe in game 2 to like counter your thing. Oftentimes, I will have sideboarded it out and swapped it out for something else. They'll be expecting me to counter their thing, and it really won't matter. And that'll change the way they play, and that could slow them down a little bit. You know, little psychological mind games when it comes to Magic. Great things. Now to round this off, we got the sideboard. Young Wolf, Relica Progenitus, more Spirit Links. Ram through. Tamiyo's Safekeeping. Let's see, Relics for Graveyard Hate. Tamayo's Safekeeping. Target permanent you control gains Hexproof and Indestructible. That lets me protect my enchantments. You also gain life with it. Young Wolf has Undying. I don't know. I have it in there just to have it in there. Ram through. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Basically makes my creature fight your creature. However, if it has trample, it deals excess damage to the creature's controller instead. And with the amount of stuff I have in here that gives me trample, my Bogle just about always has trample. So not only is your creature getting killed, you're getting punished for it. Spirit Link, I explained why this is awesome earlier. So yeah, we'll move on to the next deck. Dania Thacker, what's up? How you doing? Sorry I didn't respond quickly. The way I'm doing this, I'm doing a live stream for people to watch, obviously, but I'm also trying to have footage that Ken can use to like edit videos. So I am like taking a break in between explaining decks to talk to people, and then I'm just kind of going back and forth like that. After I get done with this, and I don't know, at the rate this is going, I probably expect this to be another 45 minutes or so. Then I'm going to have a Starfield stream, and that's going to be really cool. I have 4 more decks that I'm going to talk about. I've talked about 4 already, and that between everything else, that took me roughly an hour. But I expect some of the decks that I have here to be a lot quicker. I spent the first half of this stream explaining my Tron decks, which the nuances of some of those can get pretty complicated. And they have a lot of little interesting synergies and stuff to explain. Some of these other decks I'm going into are a lot more simple. And yeah, Graveyard Hate is rude. It really is. It really is, especially for people who like reanimating things from the graveyard. But in Pauper, it is important to have Graveyard Hate because, yeah, you don't want to be the one who does not have an answer to somebody's graveyard strategy. That's like super awkward. Like, fuck, this person's going off and doing all the things and touching all the cards, and I can't do anything about it, and that doesn't feel very good. So, yeah. Trying to decide which deck to explain next. I got 4 of them here. I don't know. What would interest you? I got my red-blue Terror, which isn't even really a done deck. I'm still experimenting with it and trying to I don't know, kind of iron out the kinks a little bit. But I did bring it on here as just kind of like a sneak peek. I got my black-blue Control. God, I love that deck. With the Tolarian Terrors that I actually got from you. I got my Fairies deck. And then I got my Artifact deck. So, I don't know. Whichever you guys want me to get into, I will. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in all of those decks. I've got some really cool artwork in some of them too. Ooh, shit. Acid reflux is a bitch. Oh, well, I give a couple more minutes for, I don't know, for comments or feedback or what have you. Ow. If anybody wants to, like, chime in, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I'll just go on. But yeah, I wasn't ignoring you, Dania. It's how I was doing this. How I'm doing my my little, yeah, my thing here. So, on to the next deck, right? I'm thinking we're gonna do the deck that I've been the most successful with. I'm thinking, fairy deck. Oh shit, you want fairies? Okay, let's do that. Sweet. Fairy deck it is. Yeah. I've actually have not been successful with this in tournaments too much, but I always have the luck of, you know, getting paired up against the worst things. All right, mono blue fairies. So, going into this, we're going to talk about the most important part of the deck first. And unlike a lot of my other decks, in this particular deck, this part is actually the most simple. So we have 17 islands. That's it. It's mono blue. So we don't need any mana fixing. We don't need any dual lands. We don't need anything crazy. We just need the right amount. If you've got too much, then you're drawing too many of them. If you've got too little, then you're never having enough of them, and that really sucks. Just about everything in this deck can be done with 2 mana. So, I'm thinking that 17 is just right. You usually end up having extra mana regardless, but if you only get 2, like, you're still fine. You're not shut down. So, this is technically called the fairy deck. It's called a fairy deck by everybody in the Pauper community. I don't necessarily consider it a fairy deck, but the community does. So, that's what we're calling it here. I actually consider it a ninja deck, and the reason for this is because we have 4 copies of Ninja of the Deep Hours, 4 copies of Circuit Moon Hacker. So we got the Circuit Moon Hacker and we got the Ninja. So basically, I don't know. The fairy deck enables these guys. So you would swing with some cheap little stupid flyer that people can't block, and then you'll ninjutsu in Circuit Moon Hacker or Ninja of the Deep Hours, and you'll like draw more cards. And that's basically what you do with these. But there's some more interactions with that are kind of interesting that you can kind of go nuts with. So I'm setting these aside right now, and we'll talk about them more later on. We got 2 copies of Delver of Secrets. Now, most fairy builds are not running Delver of Secrets, and you don't really need to run it. This is kind of a pet card of mine. It's something I just like, so I wanted to run it. Also, all the scrying and filtering this deck has, it just synergizes really well. But it's not like a dedicated Delver deck, so I've only got 2 of those. The other card that I have 2 of are Brian Barrow Intruder. It's got Flash. When it enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -2, -0 until end of turn. You would use that to... you should use that to basically reduce the... the power of an opponent's creature before blocking it, or, preventing damage with like infect creatures or whatever. There's combat tricks you can do with it. It's pretty sweet. So you will notice that we have 12 humans. These are all humans. We also have 12 fairies, so let's get into those. And then we'll talk about why we have 12 of each, because it's kind of important to the deck. So, we have 4 copies of Fairy Seer. This is actually one of my favorite fairies in this deck, and it's not... it's more powerful than it looks. When it enters the battlefield, you scry 2. What makes that really, really awesome is you're stacking your deck. You're controlling more or less what you're going to get for the next 2 turns. And then it's a 1/1 flyer. You attack with it, bring it back to your hand with Circuit Moonhacker, and then play it again, scry your stuff again. You can filter your deck a lot, which can really help you, get what you actually want and get what's actually relevant for your game. I was playing with my roommate earlier, and he learned the hard way exactly how powerful that is. 4 copies of Fairy Miscreant. It's a 1/1 with flying for 1. Enters the battlefield. If you control another creature named Fairy Miscreant, draw a card. I very rarely get to do that. I very rarely have more than a single copy of Fairy Miscreant in a single game, but that's okay. I'm not going to be salty over it. It's just, it is what it is. Now, my favorite card in the entire deck here, Spellstarter Sprite. We got 4 copies of that. When it comes into play, counter target spell with converted mana cost of X or less, where X is the number of fairies you control. And it's got Flash. So you could counter somebody's spell with it when you're flashing it in, and then use it as a surprise blocker. Or if you don't use it as a surprise blocker, you could bring it back with these ninjutsu tricks and, just keep countering your opponent's stuff. Anybody who's played against the deck while I was doing this can testify that this is annoying. Anytime I've played against fairies and my opponent got to do that, it's always annoyed the crap out of me. So, we have 12 fairies, 12 humans. Why is this important? Let me stack these up to clean this up a little bit. Well, why is this important? This is important because of one particular card that I have in here that helps me enable my life goal of touching all of the cards, as my friend would say. Of One Mind. This spell costs 2 less to cast if you control a human creature and a non-human creature. So for 1 mana, you get to draw 2 cards. Those 2 cards could be the 2 cards you need to win. Or they could be garbage. But either way, you get 2 cards. Now that's the creatures and most of the drawing stuff covered. Let's talk about combat tricks and interaction. So I have a lot of little stupid tiny things that, have flying, and they're evasive and hard to block and hard to deal with, right? Now, I have 4 copies of Mutagenic Growth. 1 Phyrexia Green. Target creature gets 2/2 until end of turn. Now, I'm not running any green mana in this deck. I would never actually pay the green mana anyways. I'll just pay the life, pay the 2 life. Target creature gets 2/2. I can use that after I flashed in a blocker. Oh, yeah, you think I'm vulnerable, but oh, here we go. Brian Burrow Intruder and Mutagenic Growth. Surprise 3/4 blocker. I love it. I could also use it to close out a game if an opponent, like, they're like, oh, well, you can, I have 3 life and you got a 1/1 flyer. I got a couple turns to go. No, you don't, buddy. Yeah, it's little surprise things like that I like to do, little tricks. Now we do have interaction and answers. Every deck that I build at least has to have interaction and answers. So, since we're mono blue, we're running 4 copies of Counterspell. 2 blue, counter target spell. It is a hard answer for almost anything that your opponent wants to play. There are very few cards in this game that cannot be countered. And I don't think any of them exist in Pauper. And we do have Spell Pierce. 3 copies of that. And that's actually, it's not a, you look at that art and think that it's expensive. It's not an expensive artwork. I think it's like 75 cents. I love the way it looks though. So that will always be the Spell Pierce artwork for me. Counter target spell or counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. This really helps in the control matchups. You're like, oh, well, you're going to play that. I'm going to counter your thing. And I'm like, well, haha, bitch, I counter your counter. What's good? And then my personal favorite card. Out of all the cards in this deck, my personal favorite card, and last but not least before we get on to the tokens and sideboard, we got 4 copies of Snap. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Untap 2 lands. It's basically free. It's basically free. You're like, no you don't. But I could also, like, one of my favorite interactions to do is I like to play Spell Starter Sprite. And then I like to, I have Spell Starter Sprite on the field, right? I like to play Snap to return Spell Starter Sprite to my hand and then play it to counter whatever you're doing. It's great. I love it. It could be an extra counter spell in this deck. It could get something I don't like out of the way. It's just, I don't know. Overall, it vibes. What can I say? It vibes. Let's see. For the side deck, we've got 4 copies of Hydroblast because fuck you if you're running red. We got 1 copy of Smoke Shroud. Equipped creature gets 1/1, has fly, or enchanted creature gets 1/1 and has flying. When a ninja enters the battlefield under your control, you can return Smoke Shroud from the from the graveyard to the battlefield attached to that creature. I really just put it in there because I think it's cool. It's not explicitly answering anything. Mantle of Tides. Equipped creature has +1/+2. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, attach Mantle of Tides to target creature you control. Cost 3 to equip. I don't know. That's another one that I just have in there because I think it's cool. Echoing Truth. Return target non-land permanent and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent to their owner's hands. Probably the coolest thing I've done with that card is when playing against somebody else's Altertron deck. Before they could swing at me for infinite, I returned all their fucking golems to their hand. It was fucking nasty of me. 2 copies of Dispel in case we're up against some other kind of control deck. 2 copies of Annual in case we're up against Bogles or Affinity. 2 copies of Gut Shot just for fun. Nobody expects a Gut Shot. And that's why I like Gut Shot. So that's fairies. Okay, now we've done fairies. We're gonna do Dimir Terror. How about that? Actually, it's the deck I've had the most success with competitively. Granted, a lot of these decks have not been played in events yet. But out of the ones that I have, this is the one I've been the most successful with. So we're going to talk about the mana base first, right? It's the most important part of any deck. So what do we got for this? 9 islands. And 4 ice tunnels. 4 contaminated aquifers. The reason why we have the ice tunnels and the contaminated aquifers is we are running black, yes, but nothing black needs to happen immediately. So, but everything blue does need to happen immediately. So we don't care if these come into play tapped, but they count as islands and swamps. And the reason why that's important is because of this lovely little card called Snuff Out. If I control a swamp, I can pay 4 life instead of paying Snuff Out's mana cost. Destroy target non-black creature. It cannot be regenerated. So, I've explained the mana base. And I even gave you a sneak peek at my removal suite. Which is really fucking rad, by the way. This deck is really good at answering things. So, what's the bread and butter? What is this deck actually trying to do? Well, we want to get instances and sorceries to the graveyard. Mostly instances. So that we can enable cards like Tolarian Terror and Cryptic Serpent to come out really, really early in the game. Because we're running black, got that Gurmag Angler. Gurmag Angler's got Delve. So ideally, you'd want to play the Cryptic Serpents or the Tolarian Terrors before you play the Gurmag Anglers. Because you don't want to get rid of all of your instances and sorceries and shit. And then not be able to play the Tolarian Terrors or Cryptic Serpents. So, how are we enabling this? What are we doing to support this? Like, why is this even a thing? Right? Well, we want to get instances and sorceries to the graveyard. That much is true of this deck. So, in order to do that, let's see, we got... Do I only have 3 copies of that? I thought I had 4 copies. Maybe I misplaced one. Yeah, we have... Oh, shit, I took one of them out for Cryptic Serpent. Okay. We got 3 copies of Consider. Look at the top card of your library. You may put that card in your graveyard, draw a card. So if you look at the top card, decide it's irrelevant, you can put it in your graveyard. If it's an instant or sorcery and you're trying to get your stuff out even faster, you can right into the graveyard. It's great. We got 4 copies of Thought Scour. Target player mills 2 cards. Most people who want to run this card target the opponent. In this instance, you want to target yourself. Put 2 cards in the graveyard and then draw a card. Now, what's great is that you can use that or Mental Note, which basically does the same thing, only you can't target your opponent. You'd use something like that with Brainstorm. Brainstorm, draw 3 cards, and then put 2 of them from your hand on top of the library in any order. What makes that significant is that Mental Note, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. So with this, you draw 3 cards. You can take 2 cards out of your hand that are irrelevant or just complete dog shit and get rid of them with Mental Note. Or instances or sorceries or whatever that you're not playing so that you can get Gurmag Angler out faster. Boom. This combo right here potentially puts 4 instances and sorceries in the graveyard. Oh, here's the 4th consider. Yeah, I guess I am running 4. I know I took something out to make room for Cryptic Serpent. Maybe it was Philology Archaeologist. That's another one. You can mill cards. So when it enters the battlefield, you mill 3 cards. You can put a non-creature, non-land from among them into your hand. If you don't, put a 1/1 counter on it. So you can mill that stuff, and then if there's something you like, you can take it back. But after he's on the field, I mean, beyond chump blocking somebody, he's kind of irrelevant, which is why I took a couple of him out for Cryptic Serpent. Let's see, we got Duress. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land from it. That player discards that card. Why I like this is because when I'm up against control, get rid of their counter spells. I actually have been featured playing this deck on the One Drop Games Twitch while I was in a tournament there. And that Duress ended up being crucial to my victory in that match with this deck. I was up against the mono blue version of this. And this is a control deck, and no control deck is complete without 4 copies of Counterspell, right? Then we got Chainer's Edict for Bogles and other things like that. Spell Pierce for control matchups. Unexpected Fangs as a middle finger to burn. Crawl from the cellar to bring back our stuff if we accidentally mill it off our deck. It's also got Flashback. Deep Analysis. We can mill those off of our deck or discard them and flash them back later for cheaper. And that's honestly how we use that card. I very rarely, if ever, find myself actually hard casting Deep Analysis for any reason. That's really I've got nothing better to do card. Really, it just exists so I can get rid of it to enable Tolarian Terror or Gurmag Angler. So, sideboard time, sideboards. Fuck. 4 copies of Hydroblast, because fuck you, red players. 1 copy of Rotten Reunion. A little bit of graveyard hate. Nile Spellbomb for even more graveyard hate. Steel Sabotage. Choose one. Counter target artifact. Return target artifact to its owner's hand. Because, you know, fuck you, affinity. Another unexpected things. Fuck you if you're doing burn. Let's see. Annual. Counter target artifact or enchantment. Again, fuck you, affinity. Chainer's Edict. Fuck you, Boggles players. Suffocating Fumes. Fuck everything on the field. Particularly fairies. Cast down. You know, when destroying, you know, or when making my opponent sacrifice something isn't enough, or taking it out with Snuff Out won't work. Snuff Out becomes kind of useless against black. So that's Dimir Terror. I've had remarkable success with it. I love this deck. So we got 2 more decks to go until we end this stream. So let's get on with the foolishness, right? So let's talk about Affinity. Affinity is one of the best decks in Pauper. Affinity will hook up with your girlfriend. Fucking, you know, bang her out on the couch. Eat your fucking snacks out of your fridge. Drink your beer. And then when you get home, it will tell you to fetch it a beer. It is one of the best decks in the Pauper format. And with that being said, we're going to get into the mana. So, for the mana, we have 3 copies of Great Furnace. Artifact land taps as red. 4 copies of Seed of the Synod. Artifact land taps as blue. 4 copies of Vault of Whispers. Artifact land taps as black. See the pattern here? All of our lands are artifacts. This is great because we have cards that care about how many artifacts we have. But this also sucks because artifacts are easy to blow up. And somebody could just blow up all of your artifact lands, which is why we are running bridges. 2 copies of Silver Bluff Bridge taps as blue or red. 3 copies of Dross Forge Bridge taps as black or red. 4 copies of Mistvault Bridge taps as blue or black. They are indestructible. So your opponent's not going to just simply blow them up. It's great. Gets even better though, okay? We got 2 copies of Kinku Artificer. When it enters the battlefield, put 3 1/1 counters on up to 1 target non-creature artifact. That artifact becomes a 0/0 homunculus artifact creature with flying. If you put that on an indestructible land, you get to be able to say one of the most ridiculous sentences that has ever been uttered in the game of Magic, and you get to say, I swing at you for 3 damage with my flying land. We have 4 copies of Mur Enforcer, 2 copies of Frogmite. Both of these guys got affinity for artifacts, and everything in this deck, every permanent in this deck is an artifact, except for Kinku Artificer. Basically, it costs 1 less to, well, okay, maybe there's other permanents in this deck. Most of the permanents are artifacts. And this gets cheaper for every artifact. So if I've got 7 artifacts, this Mur Enforcer is free. If I've got 4, Frogmite's free. So you can just like really early in the game, just start throwing crap on the field. It's great. Thoughtcast, affinity for artifacts. Spell costs 1 less for each artifact you control. Draw 2 cards. It's sort of like the Fairies deck. I'm drawing 2 cards for 1 mana. What's not to like? I mean, provided I, meet the conditions, which this deck easily ends up doing. I got Metallic Rebuke. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. It's got Improvise. My artifacts can help me cast the spell. Each artifact I tap after I am done activating mana abilities pays for 1. We got 4 copies of Galvanic Blast. As far as this deck is concerned, it is the strictly better Lightning Bolt. Galvanic Blast does 2 damage to target creature or player. However, Metalcraft. It deals 4 damage to target creature or player instead if you control 3 or more artifacts, which should be happening by turn 2. So we like touching all the cards, as my friend says. So we got 3 copies of Reckoner's Bargain. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact or a creature. You gain life equal to the sacrifice permanent's mana value. Draw 2 cards. Now that's really awesome. Somebody's like, oh, you got your Mirror Enforcer. I'm going to blow that up. I'm going to sacrifice that shit. I'm going to gain 7 life. And I'm going to draw 2 cards. Usually I like to hold on to that for when somebody's trying to blow up something of mine. Same with Deadly Dispute. Deadly Dispute, as an additional cost to cast, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Draw 2 cards, create a treasure token. It's great. It's especially great when you're, throwing away things like Ichor Wellspring or Chromatic Star. Chromatic Star can filter your mana if you need it. When it goes to a graveyard, draw a card. Ichor Wellspring, when it enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, draw a card. It's absolutely awesome. Nile Spellbomb for graveyard hate. Boom. Blood Fountain, when it enters the battlefield, get a blood token. Sacrifice a Blood Fountain, return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Your opponent's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna blow your stuff up. And if that's cool, I'll just get it back. Crack Clan Crack Clan Shaman. Sacrifice an artifact, deals 1 damage to each creature without flying. Board Wipe. Somber Hoverguard, affinity for artifacts, 3/2 flyer. I just have 1 because I wanted something with flying. I should swap that out for another Kenku Artificer, shouldn't I? Electrickery, board wipe, 1 damage to target creature you don't control, or if you pay its overload cost, you replace the word target with each. That's just awesome. Makeshift munitions. Last but certainly not least. 1 colorless, sacrifice an artifact or creature, deals 1 damage to any target. You can blow up a lot of things with it, and I like to. So that is the main deck for Affinity. Now let's talk about the tokens and the sideboard. So, you're going to want some treasure tokens. You're going to want blood tokens. I think one of these tokens can be either. Nope, that's golems. Okay. And that's clues. Rip. Yeah, whatever. Got treasure tokens, got blood tokens. Boom. That's what you need. Two copies of Gorilla Shaman. XX1, destroy target non-creature card with converted mana value X. Just, blow things up. It's particularly good in the mirror match. Like, okay, I'm gonna blow up your artifact lands now. It's awesome. Let's see, we've never been terribly fond of blue. So we're running 4 Hydroblasts. If y'all haven't seen, any deck that I am running that has any amount of blue is going to have Hydroblast in the sideboard. Like any deck in the history of ever. Same with either Red Elemental Blast or Pyroblast for red. If I'm running red, I'm going to have it. It's going to happen. Couple more copies of Crack Clan Shaman. Couple copies of Chainer's Edict. Player sacrifices a creature. Fuck you, Bogles. Diabolic Edict. Fuck you, Bogles. But fuck you at instant speed. Gurmag Angler in the sideboard. I don't know. At the time I came up with this, Gurmag Angler is kind of a pet card that I really liked. So I put him in there. Fight me, bitch. Whatever. So that's Affinity. And we're moving on to our last deck. This last deck is not done. This footage of this last deck is not even for my editor to edit. I'm just giving you guys a sneak peek at something I'm working at. Some of y'all who have tuned into a previous Paper Magic stream have already seen version 1 of it. It's almost tweaked out. I'm gonna have to test it some more, obviously, but I'm liking where it's at. I'm really excited about it. So this is gonna be Scred Terror. That's what I'm gonna call it. Or no, Terror Snipe. Terror Snipe sounds way cooler. So for our mana, we got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got 10 snow-covered islands. What? Snow-covered? Yeah, there's a reason for that. We got 3 mountains. Snow-covered mountains. I got 2 copies of Volatile Fjord. 2 copies of Swiftwater Cliffs. The Swiftwater Cliffs will turn into Volatile Fjords when I get them. They're basically tap to add red or blue, but these guys are snowlands. That's our mana base. So this deck wants to win with Tolarian Terror and Cryptic Serpent. I think Tolarian Terror is better. But we do have Cryptic Serpent because Cryptic Serpent is bigger and I can run, more copies. They cost 1 less for each instant or sorcery in the graveyard. Tolarian Terror has Ward. Beyond that, they're just big fucking fat creatures that I can get out really early on. This deck likes to play a lot of instances and sorceries. So I sat back and I thought about it. I was thinking about the way Tolarian Terror decks typically work. Well, Gutter Snipe was downshifted in Commander Masters. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, which is most of this deck, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. It's just absolutely brutal. I don't expect Gutter Snipe to live if I get him on the field. If he does live, he'll punish the opponent for letting him live. And that's all there is to it, but hey. I'm thinking that he'll just be removal like lightning rods. And it's like I win-win either way. Either I get my opponent to waste a kill spell or Or I get a gutter snipe. Monastery Swift Spear. 1/2 with haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, i.e. instant or sorcery, it gets 1/1 until end of turn. So, yeah, he gets to be bigger, and he's got haste. I can do stuff with that. Now let's get into the rest of the deck, shall we? Because the rest of it's just instances and sorceries. Some of it I feel like should be pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to explain it to you guys anyways. We got 4 copies of Counterspell. We're not running some like crazy 3-color thing. So we could actually pull off 2 blue. So, yep. There will always be 4 Counterspells where I can. This is going to be like very similar to the Dimir Terror deck, but it's a little bit different, and you'll see. I don't have the bougie versions of these cards for this deck yet. We got 4 copies of Thought Scour. Target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Draw a card. Usually, in this case, you target yourself. Mental Note. Yeah, Mental Note. Does the same thing, basically. Except for you cannot target your opponent. Oh well. And then I already explained to you guys how Brainstorm synergizes with that. We got 3 copies of Brainstorm in this. Brainstorm, basically, if you have that combo, you can more or less take 2 garbage cards out of your hand and throw them away. Or 2 instances and sorceries that you just are not sure you're going to use. We have 3 copies of Spell Pierce. That still remains my favorite artwork, and it's not terribly expensive, so I may as well have it in the deck. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. Really good against control. Like, how badly do you want to counter this? We do like scrying things. I might take one of these out for a Brainstorm, but we got 2 copies of Preordained. Scry 2, then draw a card. 3 copies of Ponder. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. You may shuffle your library, then draw a card. So one thing I'm thinking about doing, I'm thinking about dropping a Preordained for a Brainstorm and then dropping a Preordained for another Ponder. I think Ponder is strictly better. Although there could be something to be said for scrying too and then using Mental Note. We have Consider, so that we can filter instances or sorceries into the graveyard, or, you know, get to our good stuff and our payoffs faster. And the rest of the deck is interaction. We have 1 copy of Vapor Snag. I don't know. I just felt like I liked Vapor Snag and I had one laying around, so I put it in the deck. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Its controller loses 1 life. We got 2 copies of Skred. Deals damage to target creature equal to the number of snow permanents you control. And then we got 3 copies of Lightning Bolt. Now, we don't have a full sideboard yet. I need to get some Hydroblasts. But I don't even have sleeves to put the sideboard in at this point. That's how fucking prototype this deck is. But so far, we have 4 copies of Pyroblast and 4 copies of Relic of Progenitus, because fuck you, blue. And fuck you, Reanimator decks. Anyways, you'll see this deck like get, I don't know, more tweaked out and perfected over the years, or over the coming weeks, and then eventually I'll post the final video of it. So, I'm thinking in an hour. At 9 p.m., I'm gonna do Starfield. So, I thank you guys for tuning in. I will see you on the next stream. Till then.